Cognitive biases, the traps of our thinking. A psychological deep dive into the hidden scripts of the human mind. Imagine you are walking through a dense forest at twilight. You hear a snap of a twig behind you. Instantly, your heart races, your muscles tense, and you scan the shadows for a predator. You don't pause to calculate the statistical probability of a squirrel versus a bear. You react. Thousands of years ago, this rapid-fire processing saved your life. Today, however, you are likely not in a forest, but in a boardroom, a voting booth, or scrolling through a news feed. That same ancient machinery, designed for survival, speed, and efficiency, is still running the show. But in the complex, data-rich environment of modern America, it often leads us astray. These mental shortcuts are known as cognitive biases. They are not random errors or signs of stupidity. They are systematic patterns of deviation from rationality. They are the code of our operating system, features that have turned into bugs. This analysis explores how these invisible forces distort our reality, why they are particularly potent in the current cultural landscape of the United States, and how we can learn to see the invisible bars of our own mental prisons. 1. The architecture of error. Why we are biased. To understand bias, we must understand the brain's primary constraint, energy efficiency. The human brain consumes about 20% of the body's energy while representing only 2% of its weight. To conserve energy, it hates ambiguity and loves patterns. It relies on heuristics, mental shortcuts, to process the millions of bits of information bombarding us daily. Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize-winning psychologist, famously distinguished between two modes of thought: System 1, fast, automatic, emotional, and subconscious, the snap-twig reaction, and System 2, slow, effortful, logical, and calculating, solving 17 times 24. Cognitive biases live in System 1. They are the autopilot. While they help us decide which toothpaste to buy without a breakdown, they are disastrous when applied to complex social, political, and financial issues. 2. The Big Three, giants that shape our world. While there are over 100 documented cognitive biases, 3 distinct traps exert a profound gravitational pull on the American psyche today. 1. Confirmation bias, the architect of echo chamber. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms one's pre-existing beliefs or hypotheses. It is the mother of all biases because it protects our ego and identity. The mechanism: when we encounter information that challenges our worldview, the brain's emotional centers, like the amygdala, light up as if we are being physically attacked. To soothe this cognitive dissonance, we instinctively dismiss the contradictory evidence and double down on what we already believe. The American context. Nowhere is this more visible than in the fragmented media landscape of the United States. Algorithms on social media platforms, Facebook, X, TikTok, are mathematically designed to exploit this bias. If you lean politically left, your feed will likely show you the smartest arguments for your side and the dumbest examples of the other. If you lean right, the inverse happens. The reality distortion. We cease to see the other side as humans with different priorities and start seeing them as enemies of reality. We don't just disagree on opinions, we begin to disagree on facts. The trap. You believe you are doing research, but you are actually engaging in search, looking only for the evidence that proves you right. 2. Survivorship bias, the myth of the self-made success. Survivorship bias is the logical error of concentrating on the people or things that survived some process and inadvertently overlooking those that did not because of their lack of visibility. The missing bullet holes. During World War II, the military looked at returning planes to see where they were shot. They decided to reinforce the areas with the most bullet holes. A mathematician, Abraham Wald, corrected them.
You need to reinforce the areas with no holes. The planes hit in those spots never came back. The American dream and entrepreneurship. American culture deeply values the self-made narrative. We look at college dropouts like Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, or Steve Jobs and think, college is unnecessary. I just need a garage and a dream. The reality distortion. We ignore the cemetery of failed startups. For every Steve Jobs, there are thousands of brilliant, hardworking college dropouts who went bankrupt. By analyzing only the survivors, we isolate the wrong variables for success. We might think risk-taking is the key, ignoring that the survivors often had safety nets like family wealth that the failures did not. The trap. It leads to overconfidence and a lack of empathy. If we only see winners, we assume winning is the default result of hard work, implying that those who fail simply didn't want it enough. 3. Negativity bias, the alarm that never stops. Negativity bias is the phenomenon where humans give more psychological weight to bad experiences than good ones. Evolutionarily, it was better to mistake a rock for a bear than a bear for a rock. The former costs you anxiety, the latter costs you your life. The mechanism. Negative events are stored in long-term memory more quickly than positive ones. Psychological research suggests the ratio is roughly 5 to 1. It takes 5 positive interactions to outweigh 1 negative one in a relationship. The media ecosystem. The U.S. news cycle is a 24-hour machine fueled by negativity bias. If it bleeds, it leads. A story about a gentle community garden will never get the engagement of a story about a violent crime or political outrage. The reality distortion. This creates a perspective known as mean world syndrome. Despite crime rates statistically dropping in many areas over the last couple of decades, Americans often report feeling that crime is at an all-time high. We perceive the world as significantly more dangerous, divided, and hostile than it actually is. The trap. Chronic anxiety and cynicism. When we believe the system is broken and dangerous, we become less likely to trust our neighbors or participate in community building. 3. The hidden architects, other distortions. Beyond the big 3, a host of other biases subtly manipulate our daily decisions. The fundamental attribution error. This is our tendency to attribute other people's behavior to their character, internal factors, while attributing our own behavior to the situation, external factors. Example, if someone cuts you off in traffic, you think, what a jerk, character. If you cut someone off, you think, I'm sorry, I'm just running late for a medical appointment, situation. Impact, it corrodes empathy. In a diverse society, this bias makes us judge other groups harshly while excusing the flaws of our own tribe. The sunk cost fallacy. This is the tendency to continue an endeavor once an investment in money, effort, or time has been made, even if the current costs outweigh the benefits. Example, staying in a toxic relationship because you've already been together for 5 years, or pouring money into a failing car repair because I've already spent $2,000 on it. Impact, it keeps us tethered to the past. In the U.S. economy, this often manifests in corporations or governments throwing good money after bad into failing projects rather than admitting a mistake and pivoting.
The availability heuristic. We judge the probability of an event based on how easily examples come to mind. For example, after a high-profile plane crash is covered extensively on the news, many people become terrified of flying and choose to drive instead. The math, statistically, driving is exponentially more dangerous than flying, but car accidents are mundane and often unreported, whereas a plane crash is a spectacle. The availability of the crash memory distorts our risk assessment. The Dunning-Kruger effect. This is a cognitive bias where people with low ability at a task overestimate their ability. Paradoxically, it takes a certain amount of competence to realize how incompetent you are.
For example, the armchair epidemiologist on Facebook who insists they know more about viruses than a scientist who has studied them for 30 years. Impact? In an age of death of expertise, this bias is rampant. It hinders genuine learning because the first step to knowledge is admitting ignorance. Anchoring bias. We rely too heavily on the first piece of information offered, the anchor, when making decisions. For example, you walk into a luxury store and see a bag for $5,000. You're shocked. Then you see a bag for $1,200. Suddenly, the second bag seems cheap or like a good deal. Impact? This is the foundation of American retail and salary negotiations. If you start a negotiation high, the final number will likely be higher than if you started low. The collective hallucination, how biases distort reality. When these biases operate in isolation, they cause personal errors. When they operate collectively across a population of 330 million people, they create a fractured reality. The death of nuance. Biases love binary thinking, good-bad, us-them. Nuance requires System 2 thinking. It is slow and calorie-expensive. In a fast-paced culture, nuance is the first casualty. We reduce complex policy issues like healthcare, immigration, economics to bumper stickers. Tribal epistemology. We have moved from "I believe this because I see it" to "I see this because I believe it." Our loyalty to our social or political tribe acts as a filter. If my side does something questionable, my confirmation bias ignores it. My fundamental attribution error excuses it as situational, and my negativity bias focuses on the worst thing the other side did. The illusion of validity. Because we surround ourselves with people who share our biases due to the false consensus effect, we become overconfident. We think, everyone I know agrees with me, so I must be right. We confuse consensus with truth. The toolkit, how to spot and mitigate biases. We cannot cure ourselves of biases. They are hardwired into our biology. However, we can build guardrails to keep them from crashing our reality. The pause, System 2 activation. Biases thrive on speed. The single most effective tool is time. Technique: before sharing a news article that makes you angry, wait 60 seconds. Ask yourself, why do I want to share this? Is it because it's true or because it makes me feel vindicated? The rule of 10. If a decision involves more than $1,000 or a significant relationship change, never decide in the room. Sleep on it. This allows the emotional heat of System 1 to dissipate. Invert the narrative. Devil's advocate. Actively fight confirmation bias by seeking disconfirming evidence. Technique: if you believe X is true, type "arguments against X" into Google. Read the best arguments of the opposing side, not to mock them, but to understand them. The pre-mortem. Before making a big decision, like moving cities, taking a job, imagine it is 1 year later and the decision was a total disaster. Write a history of why it failed. This forces you to see risks that optimism bias hides. Decouple identity from ideas. We often treat our opinions like limbs. If someone attacks our opinion, we feel they are cutting off our arm. Mindset shift: treat your ideas like clothes. You wear them, but you can change them if the weather changes. If someone points out your fact is wrong, thank them. They just helped you upgrade your wardrobe. Broaden your inputs. To fight availability heuristic and survivorship bias, you need better data. Technique: diversify your media diet. If you read the New York Times, read the Wall Street Journal editorial page occasionally. If you listen to NPR, listen to a libertarian podcast. You don't have to agree, but you need to see what information is available to others that isn't available to you. Blind the data. To fight stereotyping and attribution errors, remove identifiers. Application: in hiring, use blind resumes where names and colleges are removed. In disagreements, try to judge the argument as if it were written by an anonymous source rather than a friend or enemy. V. Conclusion. The virtue of humility. The study of cognitive biases teaches us one profound lesson. We are not as rational as we think we are. We are emotional, tribal, storytelling creatures who desperately want the world to make sense. Recognizing these traps is not about becoming a cold, calculating robot. It is about becoming a more compassionate and effective human. When we understand the fundamental attribution error, we forgive faster. When we understand confirmation bias, we listen better. When we understand negativity bias, we can choose hope over despair. In a world fighting for your attention and reaction, the most revolutionary act is to stop, think, and question your own mind.